Fudge-a-mania Chapter 7, The Best News of the Century. Mitzi was smaller than Fudge, with long hair tied in a ponytail. She wore a baseball glove on her left hand. Mrs. A introduced us to her as soon as we got to the house. "This is Fudge Feathers," she said, "and this is his big brother." She put her finger to her mouth and paused. "Peter," I said, helping her out. "I don't know why people can always remember Fudge's name, but not mine." "Yes," Mrs. A said, "Peter Feather." "Feather is a funny name," Mitzi said. "Actually, it's Hatcher," I told her, setting the record straight. "But I thought your uncle's name is Feather," Mrs. A said. "It is," Fudge told her. "His first name is Feather," I exclaimed before things got any more confused. "Feather Hatcher. Uncle Feather Hatcher." "Oh," Miss A said, laughing, "I get it now. So you're the Hatcher boys, not the Feather boys." "That's right," I told her. "I like Feather better," Mitzi said. "And Fudge isn't a name, it's a candy." "It's a name, too," Fudge told her. "Right, Pete?" "That's right," I said. "Doesn't he have another name?" Mitzi asked me. "A real name?" "It's Farley," Fudge told her. He stuck out his chin, daring her to say anything more. "Farley," Mitzi said, opening her eyes really wide. "That's a real name?" "Yes," Fudge said. "Grandma," Mitzi said, "is Farley a name?" "It's a beautiful name," Mrs. A said. "There was once a handsome movie star named Farley Granger." She closed her eyes and kind of sighed. When she went into the house to get us a snack, Sheila went with her. As soon as they were gone, Mitzi got shy. She looked at the floor of the porch. Then she looked at the ceiling. She socked her fist into her baseball glove to make up the pocket deeper, but she didn't say a word. Fudd watched her and hummed a little tune. He didn't have anything to say either. I decided it was up to me to get things going between them, so I said, "That's a good-looking baseball glove." "I call it my Mitzi," she said, hugging it to her chest. "Big gave it to me." "Who's Big?" Fudge asked. "My grandpa," Mitzi said. "Big Apfel." "Big who?" I asked, sure I misunderstood her. "Big Apfel," she said again. I couldn't believe this. I fell behind her and spoke very slowly. "Are you telling us your grandfather is Big Apfel, the baseball player?" Mitzi nodded. "I have his baseball card," I said. "I know his stats by heart." "You want to play in his game?" Mitzi asked. "His game?" I asked. She nodded again. "We play every Sunday." "Are you saying that everyone who wants to play ball with Big Apfel can?" "You have to pass the over-under test first." "What's the over-under test?" "You have to be over 4 and under 104. "And that's it?" I asked. "That's it," she said. "Yahoo!" I yelled, jumping so high I almost knocked over one of Mrs. A's hanging plants. "This is the best news I've heard in a long time." "Is it the best news of the century?" Fudge asked. "It could be," I told him, as I yahooed again. In a minute, all three of us were jumping up and down and yahooing all over the porch. That's when Perfect Babysitter appeared, holding a pitcher of juice. "I'm gone for 5 minutes," she said. 5 minutes, and look at you, carrying on like a bunch of monkeys." "But, honey," Fudge said, "it's the best news of the century." "What's the best news of the century?" Sheila asked. "Who knows?" Fudge said. "I don't even know what a century is." I ran all the way home. As soon as I got there, I called Jimmy Fargo. I'm not supposed to make long-distance calls without permission, but this was definitely a special occasion. I was still trying to catch my breath when Jimmy answered. "Are you sitting or standing?" I asked. "Standing." "Well, sit down." "Okay," he said, "I'm sitting." "Where?" I asked. "What's the difference? I want to imagine how you look when I tell you the news." "I'm sitting on the floor in the kitchen," Jimmy said, "with my back against the refrigerator." "Okay, I've got the picture." "So what's the story?" Jimmy asked. "You're never going to believe who our neighbor is up here." I paused for a second and took a big breath. Then I dropped the news. "Big Apfel." Jimmy didn't say anything. You fainted, right?" I said. "No." "But you're speechless." "No." "You don't believe me?" "I believe you," Jimmy said, "but I don't get it. Did you say Big Apple is your neighbor or what?" "I said Big Apfel, Boston Red Sox, the greatest center fielder of all time? Ty Cobb was the greatest center fielder of all time, or maybe Willie Mays. I wasn't going to argue with Jimmy. Instead, I explained that this was a chance for us to play ball with one of the greatest. I reminded him to bring his glove and his Mets cap to Maine. Then I waited for him to say something. When he didn't, I asked, "Are you still there?" "I strike out a lot," he said finally. "Who doesn't?" "Probably Big Apfel." "I'm not talking about the major leagues. We're talking about your basic Sunday ball game." "Speaking of basics," Jimmy said, "how it going with the Queen of Cooties?" I hardly ever see her. She's got a job babysitting." "That's a relief," Jimmy said. I didn't tell him who she was babysitting. I couldn't get to sleep that night. I kept thinking about Jimmy and me playing ball on Big Apfel's team, but that reminded me that Jimmy still doesn't know we're sharing a house with the Tubmans. I have to come up with a good excuse, and soon, or I'll never hear the end of it from him. I tossed and turned as Fudd babbled in his sleep. I gave him a kick and he rolled over. After a while, I got out of bed and tiptoed down the hall to the bathroom. It's so quiet in the country and dark. In the city, it's never dark. You can always look out your window and see lights. It's never quiet either. You can hear the buzz of traffic even in the middle of the night. I used the toilet, then flushed, and that's when it came to me. The perfect excuse for sharing a house with the Tubmans. I flushed again and imagined myself telling Jimmy the long, sad story. I'd say, "See, when we first got to Maine, we moved into this big old house. It had 7 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, and you could see the ocean from every window. But unfortunately, there was a big problem." "What problem?" Jimmy would ask. "Poison gas," I'd say. "Poison gas in all the toilets. Green, steamy, gurgly stuff that bubbled up every time we flushed." "Blah," Jimmy would say, making a terrible face. "Dad had to call the health inspector," I'd continue. "She took one look and went nuts. 'This is a disaster,' she cried. 'This is a serious environmental disaster.'" "So then what?" Jimmy would ask, biting his nails. "She condemned the place. Even though she was sorry about ruining our vacation, she had no choice. The police came and boarded up the house. They nailed a sign to the front door. 'Warning, poison gas in toilets. Flush at your own risk.'" "Wow," Jimmy would say, "you're lucky you got out alive." And I'd say, "Yeah, I know." "A brilliant story," I told myself as I turned out the bathroom light. "Jimmy's very big on environmental issues. He's got posters all over his room. Save the whales, save the dolphins, save the rainforest. So he'll understand that the Tubmans were just trying to save our vacation when they let us share their house." I went back to my room and got into bed. This time, I had no trouble falling asleep.